Good evening, and thank you for joining me for part 3 of my trilogy, The Divine Feminine. For many of you who have been following me on here for several years, you'll know that 2 years ago, my home was destroyed, and I lost every single thing that I owned. Just like that. In the end, when it was all said and done, I was in the hospital due to chemical exposure without even any clothes to leave in. Anyone who's experienced a house fire will tell you that when you lose everything, baby pictures, all of it, it's as though you've died. And I will concur. That is exactly how that experience felt. I did, however, have some money saved up and a plan. So I thought, okay, this is what I'll do. However, when I went to execute this plan, it all unraveled horrifically in the most wonderful way. And I lost all of my money. And as this was all happening, I casually heard, because I wasn't the person then that I am now, that this was going on during a full moon in the zodiac sign of Capricorn. For the significance of that, please see the first video here in this trilogy. Now, does Saturn restrict us like this just to be a dick? No. Contrary to whatever the Matrix will tell you, the universe never does anything just to be a dick. In fact, the universe is always working in our favor, even if it might not feel like that at the time. Saturn restricts us because, hey, your shoelaces are untied, and if you're going to keep running, you're going to eventually fall, trip over, and knock out your teeth. And it was one of those times where I had to humble myself and realize that my logic, my plans, my pull yourself up by the bootstraps don't mean anything in the face of the will of the universe. It was one of those times I had to accept, and I believe all human beings at some point have to go through this, where you realize that if the universe wants you to go over here, you're fucking going. And what this forced me to do was to step out into the unknown. Without knowing where I was going to sleep, without knowing where I was going to eat, I kind of fucked with tarot, so I kind of knew what chakras were, and I kind of understood that the root chakra deals with your home, your security, and your financial well-being. So I thought, okay, try that. And I've been on a spiritual walkabout with this now for the past 2 years, like a carrot dangling in front of a horse, only now the momentum of it all is quickening. And just a little bit ago, I got a sign from the universe as an indication that now is the time for me to start talking about this. I'm like a phoenix that has risen from the ashes. I'm immortal. And I know that. Just as matter, this avatar, is the densest form of energy, the slowest moving. That's why it can be perceived with these two eyes. It's coagulated by higher forms of energy. This is the least that's happening here. I'm over trying to convince anyone of anything, but I do have all of this ancient esoteric knowledge now that dates back to ancient Egypt, so I'm going to share it, and I've got to shine my light. And I have to say that when I look out at what is happening in the world currently today, and look back on what happened to me, the parallels are there. In that, the way I was living my life before all of that was by a template that was handed to me by the Matrix. Do 1, 2, and 3, and you will get X, Y, and Z. The only problem with that is it does not work. It never has worked. And it's all predicated on a lie. And when I look out at the way the world conducts itself in its relationship to its nature and to each other, I have to say, it does not work. It never has worked. And it's all predicated on a lie. that we have a chance here to affect change. But I'm talking about real change. The Matrix always insists on handing me a Band-Aid for the gunshot wound that it has inflicted, if it's even going to bother to address the gunshot wound at all. If anyone could even consciously comprehend just how deep that wound goes. Tell me, what law are you going to pass that's going to heal the ancestral trauma that has been written into our DNA and then passed down through the generations till present day? What lawmaker has a mental health and a spiritual intelligence strong enough to even understand what we're talking about here? The Matrix has no interest in solving the problem, just as there is no money in the cure. As long as it can keep me looking out here, change is around the corner. You got to do X, Y, Z. And by the way, look at this terrible thing I did. And look at all this, and I'm just constantly inundated with conflict and negativity at all times, thus sapping me of my energy, because the Matrix knows that if I put this drama down and could look away for 5 seconds, I would understand it has no relevancy in the natural world. Let me ask a question. How many of us came out of our mother's wombs watching a television set 24/7 broadcasting the news that is owned by one of the 6 major corporations that own all of the news channels, as well as shares in the prison industrial complex? What is a prison? Does any of that have anything to do with the real natural world? Were we put here for this? Whereas the divine feminine knows, on the other end, that if I'm really going to stop the hemorrhaging, I have to extract the bullet. In fact, she knows that the only way out is to go in. And as I go in, I go up. And however high I want to ascend is only relative to how deep I'm willing to go. Yin, yang, as above, so below. The Son, the Father. The Holy Spirit. This is not a violent exodus or a violent call to action. Matter is the densest form of energy. It's the least of what's happening here. This is a spiritual war. This is a war for our consciousness. If you could see out this window today, you'd see that I live on the West Coast and we are on fire, and the smoke is so bad You can't even be outside today without it making you sick. And this is all due to climate change. The law of magnetism polarity states that if things can really be this bad, and they are that bad, it only stands to reason things can also be that great. Let's let these depths be the launching pad for our ascension into the fifth dimension of human experience. Let us go inward, and in so doing shall we manifest a new earth. Just as the external world mirrors the internal world, just as the densest energy follows the highest. Let's collectively raise the consciousness of humanity and ascend out of this current state. It's strictly a numbers game. I wish I had something cool to say to end this, but I don't. And that's okay. In the fifth dimension, we're not so concerned with looking cool. We're way more concerned with being real. Because that's what's cool. So, thank you for your time. I never take it lightly. And from my heart to your heart, as always, of course, namaste.